Today we're covering a tragic story. Lucy Letby, a NICU nurse in the UK, is convicted of killing 7 babies and attempted murder of 10 others. It was a total of 13 babies that died. We're going to cover this story, react to it, and give our thoughts. Very unfortunate and tragic. Welcome back to the show. I am Nene Pablo, host of this podcast, registered nurse, and creator of Nice Veins, Bro. Here we talk about all things God, wellness, and purpose from a healthcare standpoint, from a healthcare worldview. If you haven't yet, subscribe, smash that like button. Welcome. And thank you, Lexa, again, my wife, my beautiful wife, for being here with me, being on the podcast. Today, we're actually talking about something that is very, very horrifying, really. I read this headline a few days ago, and it is about a nurse in the UK. Some facts: attacking a total of 17 babies from 2015 to 2016. People are saying she's the most prolific infant murderer in the UK, for sure. When you start looking closer into the story, some really crazy stuff start to surface that make you realize how messed up not only this person is, but also just the system that she was working, the NHS, which is the socialized government healthcare system. So we're gonna actually go and watch some of these videos or some of the news coverage from it, and we're going to kind of give a reaction to it. So here's something on YouTube that we found. We're going to listen to it.
Criminologist David Wilson has studied doctors and nurses who become serial killers.
The person who kills within a healthcare setting has already developed the desire to kill before they join the healthcare setting. And if you want to kill, of course you're going to identify people who are vulnerable, people whose deaths won't be noticed. And so guess what? The people that serial killers target, by and large, are older people, or they target very, very young people, specifically in a neonatal unit in this case, where again, small babies with chronic underlying health care, where their deaths won't be commented upon or seen as being suspicious, because tragically, some babies born in that situation will die.
The judge-led inquiry following Beverly Allett's conviction in 1993 criticised the speed of the hospital's response. Again,
and you're going to see a theme here
with
hospitals and how they respond. Okay, we've had stories like this before where we talk about the delay in how these systems will respond.
In a single year, even though doctors had raised concerns.
See, there it is.
Susan Gilby took over running the NHS Trust soon after Lucy Letby's arrest.
The paediatricians were discussing, the terrible nights on call that they were having. One of them said, every time this is happening to me, that I'm being called in for these catastrophic events, which were unexpected and unexplained, Lucy Letby is there. And then somebody else said, yes, I found that. And then someone else had the same response. And they all realised that the common factor for each of them was Letby's presence on the unit.
The first 3 babies died in June 2015.
Check this out.
Senior managers agreed to hold an external investigation. That never happened. 4 months later, 4 more babies were dead, and a staff analysis linked Lucy Letby to every one of them. By the following February, 10 babies had died, but when doctors...
So that's literally 10 deaths, okay? They promised that they were going to do an investigation. After 3, 4 months go by, another, 5, I think it was?
I can't remember.
But we've got 10 deaths. Now it's 2016 of February.
Yeah.
So wild stuff, man.
Asked 2 senior managers for an urgent meeting, they did not respond for 3 months.
Of course.
In June, over 2 days, 2 more babies died. Lucy Letby was on shift for both. By now, there had been 13 unexplained deaths. In September, the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health urged the Trust to investigate each death individually. That didn't happen. It was only the following May, after continual pressure from staff, that the Trust called the police. Almost 2 years after the first unexpected
That's when
deaths.
the cops come in. After 2
When
years.
she was arrested in July 2018, Lucy Letby was still working at the Trust. No disciplinary action had been taken against her.
There is only one serial killer of babies that's worked in that organisation, and the executive team were not the people who were responsible for the deaths of those babies. But they had some opportunities to get to the bottom of what was happening.
Plenty.
The reputation of the organisation and protecting that reputation was a big factor in how people responded to the concerns raised.
I don't know if you remember the story that we covered a while back, or a couple of episodes before about the patient who was almost coerced or pressured into hospice. Do you remember that story? Mm-hmm. And it was this big issue, that they were pressuring patients into hospice because they were not getting paid after a certain amount by insurance.
Oh, yeah.
And the length of stay, if they just marked it down as, oh, they're in hospice or they're in comfort care, basically, that it didn't count as a ding towards the hospital because that death didn't count as an in-hospital thing.
Death, it counted as a hospice death.
Right. And by those metrics, I mean, the executive team was getting bonuses based off of, lower in-hospital deaths. And so you'll see there's many stories, countless stories. And if you know a story, comment below of, hospitals also where they've done things, or executives, or whatever it may be, an organization will take things and try to protect the name of the organization. Mm-hmm. We saw that with Redonda Vaught. It was all her.
Yeah, not the hospital.
Not the hospital's fault at all, right? Even though she came out clean and was saying, hey, I made these mistakes, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And there were issues within the charting system that were, oh, yeah, you should
It was a regular practice to override for medication, like routine medication withdrawals. Yeah. So, yeah, I think something that we are seeing here in the story of Lucy Letby and that hospital, it's like, why, or the question I ask is, why in the world did it take so long for them to investigate? Mm-hmm. If you're having repeated concerns being raised by staff, and we'll get into another interview that shows kind of the intensity of those concerns raised, and you get a behind the scenes look that this nurse was being questioned, her practice was being questioned pretty early on
by doctors
who were concerned and had seen repeated behaviors or
really sketchy stuff,
and they're like, dude, we got to do something about this. But the hospital management, the higher ups were saying, look, we don't want this to be a big deal.
Yeah. And
stop criminalizing her.
Yeah,
it's just so frustrating that it took so long. And I don't, it's, as a nurse who works in the hospital, whenever I think of this, I think about thinking about it from the executive's perspective. I understand the concern for protecting your organization's name
and the image,
and the image,
that's
obviously.
Important. We're not trying to say it's not important.
Yeah. You don't want to just without thought, just throw your organization to the wind because you have people's trust. The numbers of people that come to your hospital are dependent on the community's trust in your organization. So I get that. But at the same time, it's like, dude, why are you not opening investigations into, especially if you promised your staff you were going to look at the causes and open internal investigations, you don't for 2 years. And then finally the police get involved.
Yeah.
That's a major failure. Failure.
It's absolutely dumb.
The months of inaction is no shock to this former NHS whistleblower and former NHS manager.
Not surprised at all. Trusts generally delay everything for as long as is possible. Now, what's fascinating here is
Now, I'm
that,
thinking
like
that the trusts are what? Those are the hospitals in UK, right? That's what you call them. I don't understand that.
I'm not sure. So a hospital trust in the UK is a National Health Service hospital which has opted to withdraw from local authority control and be managed by a trust instead.
What's fascinating here is that, like many NHS trusts in which tragedies have occurred, for different reasons, obviously to this specific case, you'll find that the prompts for action come from outside the system, because the system ignores its own people.
Yeah.
If you come at the system, if you approach directors and senior managers with good news without evidence, that's welcomed, that's taken on board. And you've just got to look at what was going on, whether it's Shrewsbury and Telford, whether it's Nottingham Hospital's maternity units, or whether it's, going back to mid-staffs, When good news is put forward, even though it's baseless, it's welcomed. But when negative news, what I would perceive as factual news, when that is brought forward, even with evidence, it tends to be pushed aside because
Even
it
with
doesn't
evidence.
suit the narrative.
Yep. It doesn't follow the narrative. That's insane.
One question remains about Lucy Letby's murders. Why?
Sometimes the healthcare serial killer will say that I was actually being merciful. This person was in a great deal of pain and I was just ending quickly. Other healthcare serial killers have often just wanted, because the unit is under such pressure, they just try to get rid of difficult patients. We've cleared another bed. It was just a kind of sort of
disgusting.
Managerial efficiency that they seemed to be expressing. I think on the basis of what emerged at court, we might be able to infer what might have motivated her. And there did seem to be a hero complex.
The babies who survived Lucy Letby's crimes will now be approaching their 8th birthdays. It has been a distressingly long wait.
Yeah. So there are cases like this where you have to look at what the administration promises, right? To protect patients, especially with all this stupid marketing. You ever see those dumb hospital marketing?
Billboards.
Yeah, hospital billboards where like, we've got your back, trust us, all this stuff. And then they don't back it up. We stand for patient safety, trust us, all this stuff. It's all built on trust. And it goes back to one of the very first episodes that we put out where I kept saying, do not trust organizations. Do not trust organizations. Trust people. Don't trust professions. Don't trust hospitals. Don't trust governments. Trust people. And I know that's really difficult, right? But when you go into a hospital, man, I know that I'm talking, you shouldn't point the finger at these large organizations and stuff, but you've got to point fingers at things where they promise something and they do not follow through.
Yeah. But that's like a tough situation because the message of our podcast, or at least what we discuss, is not necessarily, hey, you need to stop trusting healthcare, stop trusting everybody. That's not the message that we're trying to share.
No.
Or be afraid everywhere you go.
Right.
Because that's also kind of conspiratorial. That's also increasing a lifestyle of fear. I don't think that's something we should encourage. That's not something we live by.
You're right.
But responsible consumerism, responsible, personal responsibility, like you're saying, you were saying, when we go into places where we would hope to trust an organization, we can't just blindly go in and think that everybody is out for our good, because that's just simply not the case.
Yeah.
We cannot assume that. So being able to take personal responsibility, asking questions whenever you don't understand, is nobody's going to advocate for you as well as you can. Somebody else can try and step in and say, hey, I'm the nurse advocate, or what is it? In hospitals, they have these people that are specifically there just to advocate for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, nurses are supposed to do that, but
right.
Yeah.
But there's another staff person that does not take care of you, at least in the hospitals I've worked in. They're there specifically to be a patient advocate.
Or your case manager really should be one of the main, which is often a position held by nurses. Really should be. That's like a champion right there for your well-being.
Yeah, but who is gonna ask nobody can be as concerned about your health or your life as much as you are. And I'm just like happy to hear of the people in this story who did advocate for these families and who were raising concerns and saying, dude, I keep on saying, dude. It's not like they approached their boards and were saying, dude. No, but they were saying, look, something's wrong and nothing has been done. And it's been a long time and we keep revisiting this issue and nothing is getting done.
Hey, I need to be with the vibes that know they never can stop me. I'm gonna be myself and be free.
We're going to talk about a doctor in this story who is absolutely, in my opinion, a hero. Just if anything in this story, okay, is good to talk about, it is this guy.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure there's other people who also stood out for good, but these are the kind of people that make you, it kind of restores your hope in humanity.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about him in a second. But I want to also, before we move on from just the tragedy of what happened with these families and these babies, in terms of a motivation for this just evil motivation. Lucy, in a Post-it note, when they started doing some research and kind of went back to her house and tried to see what was doing some research as to see what was the motivation, an investigation, they found Post-it notes that said, quote, "I don't deserve to live. I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough. Quote, I am a horrible, evil person." And in capital letters, she put, "I am evil. I did this." She also had notes that said, "Overwhelming fear. I panic. I'll never have children or marry. I'll never have a family, and I don't deserve to live. Why me?"
That makes me so upset. Like my eyes start to tear up a little bit because
like literally my heart started racing
because you're like, dude, dude. I keep saying dude so much, but reading that and hearing that she is, not to make a case that she didn't mean to do it. It wasn't premeditated murder. She wasn't evil, but like she was unwell.
She was
somebody who writes that kind of stuff is unwell of mind.
They are messed up.
Yeah.
And when you are in that position and the more you have that dark energy just fill your life, you will do stupid stuff. You will do stupid stuff. And when we talk about a mental health crisis in this country or in this world, really, because she's in the UK, she's not US.
Yeah.
But, this is what we're talking about. And there's no excuse for the things that you do. There really is you deserve the punishment, no matter, but this is, you can obviously see she was not well.
Yeah. It's just so twisted to hear that, that she knew of her guilt. And the whole time they're doing this investigation, she did not admit to any of her crimes.
All 22 counts that they had against her, she denied it all.
She denied it all.
No, I'm not guilty.
Yeah, but at home, she's writing in her little Post-it diary or whatever, like, I'm evil, and she totally knew, and it's so incriminating to see those notes. And then, like, on one of the videos too, it talks about how she even had a calendar with the initials marked, like on the dates of some of these murder attempts and attacks on these babies. She wrote their initials. Like how?
And do you remember what was the method that she used?
Oh, that's right. So, some of the times that she like would poison these babies, she would use insulin, or she would overfeed them with their, like tube feeding, or she would put air or milk or tube feeding into their nasogastric tubes, or she would inject air into their like IV lines.
It's really messed up.
IV or ART line, I don't know, but it just says into their intravenous, into some of their, I think, intravenous lines.
It says here that she filed a grievance against her employers since she was relocated, because she was relocated from the NICU while they were doing the investigation.
Yeah. So after like multiple times of this happening where everybody's associating with her because she's always been on shift whenever these babies are dying or whenever they're deteriorating unexpectedly, the staff raises concerns. And so they move her off of the NICU into some other department where she's, I guess, not involved in direct patient care. And lo and behold, none of these weird, unexpected
it stopped.
episodes were happening anymore.
I want to show another video here that kind of goes into this, but it's the doctor that I want to really, I really want to praise this guy. Okay, and he's you can tell he's a humble person who feels like he needs to do the right thing. This is the attitude we need to have. And so I'm just thankful for God for people like this.
Oh, yeah.
We need to be people like this who will take personal responsibility. He doesn't care what happens with the hospital and what they're telling him. He's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And so let's take a look at this doctor and how he responds to the situation.
A doctor who helped catch Lucy Letby and bring her to justice has told ITV News that hospital bosses took 2 years to alert the police, despite consultants repeatedly raising concerns. Speaking exclusively to our UK editor, Paul Brand, Dr Ravi Jayaram said managers forced him to apologise to the nurse after he told them he suspected she was killing babies.
When babies started dying on Lucy Letby's ward, her colleagues never expected to catch a killer. But having saved countless lives in his career, Dr Ravi Jayaram potentially spared many more by stopping her.
What was it like when babies started dying and you couldn't understand why?
I've been a paediatrician since 1992, and I had never in my career seen anything like this. And actually, initially, there was a feeling of thank goodness Lucy was on, because she's really good in a crisis, she's really good at managing these things. But as time progressed, the thoughts started springing into our heads. Could she be doing something deliberately?
So the thought starts sinking in that there could be a killer on the unit. I mean, that's a big moment.
It's a big moment, and it's a chilling moment. I don't think anybody has a rule book for how you deal with a situation where you're suspecting that somebody's causing deliberate harm to babies on your neonatal unit.
In June 2015, after 3 babies died and another collapsed, doctors met with their managers and noted Lucy Letby's presence. 2 more babies would die later that year, another 4 collapsed, and by early 2016 there had been 3 internal reviews, but none of them came up with an answer. Until something happened which made Dr Jayaram even more certain of his own theory.
Tell me about the night when you walked in on Lucy Letby standing over the cot of baby K.
That is a night that is etched on my memory and will be in my nightmares forever, to be honest. I was sitting at the desk just outside the room writing notes, and the nurse looking after the baby said she was popping to the delivery suite to go and talk to the parents, and she said, I've left Lucy in there babysitting. Part of me was saying, you better go in and just check everything's okay, because you know what's happened before when Lucy's been on duty. As I walked towards the incubator, I could see on the monitors that the oxygen saturations, which is basically the baby's oxygen levels, were dropping. And they dropped to a level that ordinarily, number one, the alarms would have been going off. But number 2, the nurse would have called for help. And Lucy Letby was standing by the top of the incubator. She didn't have her hands in the incubator.
What was she doing then?
Well, she was just standing there. Now, tubes become dislodged. But this was a 25-week gestation baby who wasn't kicking around, who wasn't vigorous. The only possibility was that that tube had to have been dislodged deliberately.
The jury didn't reach a verdict in relation to that baby, but 2 more almost died shortly afterwards. Yet the next month, managers told doctors there was no evidence Lucy Letby was causing any harm. She was moved from night to day shifts, but when 2 more babies died and another 2 collapsed in June, this time consultants demanded a meeting with the hospital board, including the then medical director Ian Harvey and then chief executive Tony Chambers, to raise their concerns.
The very first thing that Tony Chambers, the chief executive, said to us, he cogitated for a few seconds and he said, well, I can see how that might be a very convenient explanation for things. And what that says to me is that he'd already decided that wasn't going on and this was us just trying to cover up.
He was trying to blame you, in other words?
I think so. He didn't say it explicitly then. We discussed having CCTV put onto the unit. We discussed her being supervised one-to-one with somebody watching her all the time. And then we heard that Lucy Letby had been moved to the Risk and Governance Department, so she'd been taken off the unit.
Suddenly, babies stopped collapsing, and the hospital asked the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health to conduct a review of the deaths. In redacted paragraphs we've seen, its report concluded that Lucy Letby was an enthusiastic, capable and committed nurse, that there was nothing about her background that was suspicious, and that concerned doctors had been going with gut feeling.
Yikes.
Those doctors were summoned to another meeting with executives who now accused them.
We bullied her. We'd behaved unprofessionally. We'd behaved in ways that were unbecoming to the profession.
That's what they were accused of.
A letter from her, which was a very aggressive letter from her, basically saying, I'm coming back to work and you have to work with me and I'm going to prove to you that I'm a great nurse and I'm not a killer like you say. And then Tony Chambers finished off by saying, so she's coming back to work, and this is the most chilling thing. I'm drawing a line under this. You will draw a line under this, and if you cross that line, there will be consequences for you.
You were asked in court, why didn't you just phone the police if you had concerns? But here is the chief executive of the hospital, your boss, saying if you take any further action, there will be consequences for you. You have to draw a line under it. I mean, that must be an impossible position for you to be in.
It's an utterly impossible and a Kafkaesque situation to be in. As well, we were told when we initially raised concerns that if we call the police, there'll be blue and white tape everywhere. That's the end of the unit. It would be really bad for the reputation of the trust.
See, there's the reputation thing again. The CEO is not saying, I'm siding with the nurse because I believe her. No. He's not even siding with the other person because he believes in the story that she's saying that I'm a good nurse. The CEO is just trying to keep basically silence anyone that could mar the reputation of the hospital or his job. And there's a video that we saw earlier. I'm not going to show it, but it's the CEO basically saying, oh, I want to create a culture where we are backing our staff members and listening to any feedback they give us. Shut up. Shut up. I'm not saying that every CEO out here is like this, okay? I don't want to blanket the entire U.S. or world healthcare system and all this and hospitals and CEOs. I know some very, very good CEOs of hospitals. Very kind-hearted people. I would say that a majority of hospitals they do not fulfill their promises. They do not stand for true patient safety, and they don't stand for patient health. They are a business that are trying to keep their doors open, and this is the reason that if you have issues with conflict of core values and you don't feel like the hospitals, you've got to leave. That's my opinion. You got to leave these places.
Yeah, I think...
Don't trust them. They don't got your back.
It's really frustrating because I'm thinking about what the CEO said. I guess it's in a different video. I don't know. But in the research of preparing for this podcast, we watched a lot of news clips and read a lot of articles. And like you said, the CEO, the former CEO at the time that she was at this hospital, that the nurse was at this hospital, they were saying like, oh, we stand for patient safety, and we also want to protect our frontliners, like our frontline workers and the people who are in it. And I don't expect for a CEO to take the nurse's side, like kind of what you said earlier. I don't expect for them to say that they believe the nurse, because that's also, I think that's dicey. As somebody who's in charge of the whole organization, I don't think you should throw your favor in one way vocally to anybody. But the way that it was said was very much like this, like I'm exerting my top-down authority. Like I'm trying to say, you better not make a big deal or else there will be like what a threat.
Well, he's like, don't call the police.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Don't call the police. And this is a very, I don't know, man.
I don't know what I would have done in that circumstance. Yeah, I probably
it's a difficult situation for the CEOs. I understand that, and I don't want to minimize the fact the reality of that is a very tough situation. Yeah. Okay, You don't want to start accusing people.
Right, because you can't just start accusing your staff members left and right, and you'd be like crucified for not standing up for your own organization.
Yeah.
However,
if there is substantial evidence, which in my opinion, and I would say your opinion as well, there's substantial evidence to later on, obviously, it was enough to convict her of a significant amount of murders, okay? Yeah, you're not doing their job correctly.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Pa la sillita, como dicen en Puerto Rico.
In fact, it was the killer who was about to turn complainant.
Watch this.
Lucy Letby took out a grievance, with doctors forced to write this apology to her.
Dear Lucy, we would like to apologise for any inappropriate comments that may have been made during this difficult period.
Imagine writing that to a
We're very
murderer.
sorry for the stress and upset that you have experienced in the last year. Please be reassured that patient safety has been our absolute priority during this difficult time.
Meanwhile, doctors continued to raise concerns, but Ian Harvey replied that there was no smoking gun and Lucy Letby would be returning to the ward, just as soon as Dr Jayaram had said sorry to her face.
I think that what they should have done, if they were going to return her back to the ward and say, okay, nothing's been found, why wouldn't they have assigned a one-to-one supervisor? If they were so concerned and they wanted to put the worries of the rest of the unit at ease.
They didn't do the internal investigation.
Well, they said that they did. So
not at the beginning.
Not at the beginning.
And remember that one case where they found the baby with a ton of insulin, and no baby in the ward was getting insulin at the time, and it was locked into the.
Yeah, it was in the pictures.
Give me a freaking break. After that initial story, where you do a little investigation, okay, just a little, didn't take that much to figure out there was no baby that was taking insulin, and the cause of death was an overdose of insulin. Listen, bro, no, that ain't happening here. You double down and you say, I ain't blaming anybody here, but we are going to make sure we button this up because for freaking sure, we're not having another baby die for some random insulin dump that someone put in your in the baby's body.
Yeah.
That's not happening here.
Yeah, for context, we didn't include it in the video, but in one of the other news reports, one of the babies that Letby tried to kill was found to have massive amounts of insulin in their body. And there were no babies on the unit who had insulin on their medication list.
No one was taking
None
any
of the
insulin.
babies in the NICU at the time had ordered insulin. Yeah. And there was insulin in the fridge, of course, the medications are kept in a separate room. So only nurses had access.
Yeah.
Nurses or pharmacists, but who's going to give medication to a baby? A nurse.
Yeah. And if doctors are saying, multiple doctors are saying, I don't feel comfortable with this.
Why is she always there whenever something bad happens to these babies?
Yeah, that's not okay.
Experience to be sat across the table in that mediation session from somebody who at this point you're quite sure could well be a killer.
Yes, it was bizarre. And of course, to listen to her saying, I'm coming back next week, will you work with me? And of course, I was having to say, well, if the trust have deemed that you're coming back to work, I will work with you. Yes, but will you be happy to work with me? I will work with you if you're on shift. Because no, I wasn't happy.
She was just 6 days away from returning to the ward before management finally allowed doctors to meet with the police.
Listen to that.
After yet another review failed to explain
the
all
doctors
of the
were allowed to meet with the police.
The police, after listening to us
finally
for less than 10 minutes, realised that this is something that they had to be involved with.
Yep.
To me speaks volumes.
Yep.
And I could have punched the air.
Yeah.
Do you think the lives of some of those babies could have been saved
Listen
if
to this.
management had taken action sooner?
It's a horrible thing to say, but I do genuinely believe that there are 4 or 5 babies who could be going to school now who aren't.
Such a sad moment. And I want to play this last clip before we close, but it's him talking about being called a hero.
The families and the police have both said to us that they consider you to be a hero. Do you think the enormity of the part you played in all of this has sunk in yet?
I'm not hero, Paul. I was just doing my job. It's my job to look after babies and children. If any meaningful change about how the NHS reacts and responds to serious and even relatively minor patient safety concerns, changes as a consequence of all of this, then I might possibly consider that I've done something heroic. Right now, I just think that I've done what I should have done.
When you think of this story at large, what kind of lessons can we learn? Two things. We've got to hold systems and organizations and leaders accountable. Number two, we have to take personal responsibility and keep our eyes open to stand for our patients, to stand for the vulnerable, to stand for them in the face of evil people like this nurse, and to stand for them in the face of large organizations. That's taking personal responsibility in these situations. And I would say we have to start with that. These organizations are never going to be perfect. But what we can start with is taking, like, growing balls, like this doctor, and saying, I don't care if the hospital is doing this or that or the other, to say, I don't care if I lose my job. I want to speak out about this.
Something's wrong.
And there are people like that. And I truly believe that nurses, I spend a lot of time, we spend a lot of time on this podcast, and it's because I'm kind of a doomsday guy. I get a lot of hate comments and stuff in some of the podcasts that we do, in some of the posts, some of the reels, because I go harsh against nurses. But I would say the large majority of nurses, they go into the profession with this interest in helping other people. And we get jaded after many years.
Yeah.
And so the reason why I'm so passionate about the personal responsibilities, because I'm trying to call that out again from these nurses. Bring that attitude back to your practice. Bring that advocacy for others. That's the nail that everything hangs from, is the desire to help somebody else. Thank you so much for joining this podcast. Thank you, Lexa, for helping me kind of talk about this story and the things that we can learn from it. And although it's a tragedy, again, let's keep those families in our prayers, because no matter what happens, they still lost someone, and that can never be recovered. Yeah. So just have those people in your prayers. And if you enjoyed this podcast, if you learned something from it, if something struck you, that you learned something or you want to share with somebody else, please share this podcast.
Yeah. Let it be a conversation starter, because there's so much more that we did not even touch on that's definitely conversation. Like, you'd have a lot of conversation over. And so if you have any further questions or like any discussion points you want to share, just comment. We're going to include the links to all of the videos that we were sharing in this podcast, so that you can watch it for yourself and kind of just gather the information on your own. But yeah.
I also want to encourage you guys, a way that you can help our small, tiny little business is by going online, not only sharing, right? Of course, we always talk about sharing, but going online to niceveinsbro.com and shopping for some merch. We have just a few items there, and we just encourage you to go on there and shop some shirts and stuff. We're wanting to add more products on there. If you're on YouTube, like the video, comment below, share it on Facebook or whatever you want to share it on, and subscribe. Remember always to be a positive force and influence within healthcare and society. Que Dios me lo bendiga. When I would listen to podcasts before I became a podcaster myself, I didn't realize how much leaving a 5-star review helped. And so now on this side, I just want you to know that it really does mean a whole lot when people review and share the content. So if you enjoyed it, please share it with somebody and leave a 5-star review on whichever platform you use, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And if you're interested, you can also find us on social media at niceveinsbro, or shop online at niceveinsbro.com. My personal stuff you can find under Nene Pablo, which is spelled Nenepablo. Pablo. I spend most of my time on YouTube making vlogs and videos and on Instagram. So I would love to connect with you. And remember, be a positive force and influence within healthcare and society. It's all about God, wellness, and purpose here. Thank you for listening.